Charlie and the Great Glass Elevator by Roald Dahl. Mr. Wonka goes too far. The last time we saw Charlie, he was riding high above his hometown in a great glass lift only a short while before. Mr. Wonka had told him that the whole gigantic fabulous chocolate factory was his, and now our small friend was returning in triumph with his entire family to take over. The passengers in the lift, just to remind you, were Charlie Bucket, our hero, Mr. Willy Wonka, chocolate maker extraordinary, Mrs. and Mr. Bucket, Charlie's father and mother, Grandpa Joe and Grandma Josephine, Grandpa Bucket's father and mother, Grandpa George and Grandma Georgina, Mrs. Bucket and fathers and mother, Grandma Josephine, Grandma Georgina, and Grandpa George were still in bed, the bed having been pushed on board just before takeoff. Grandpa Joe, as you remember, had got out of bed to go around the chocolate factory Charlie. The great glass lift was 1,000 feet up and cruising nicely. The sky was brilliant blue. Everybody on board was wildly excited at the thought of going to live in the famous chocolate factory. Grandpa Joe was singing. Charlie was jumping up and down. Mr. and Mrs. Bucket were smiling for the first time in a year, and the three old ones in the bed were grinning at one another with pink toothless gums. What in the world keeps this crazy thing up in the air? Crowed Grandma Josephine. Madam, said Mr. Wonka, it is not a lift any longer. Lifts only go up and down inside building, but now that has taken us up into the sky, it has become an elevator. It is the Great Glass Elevator. And what keeps it up? Said Grandma Josephine. Skyhooks, said Mr. Wonka. You amaze me, said Grandma Josephine. Dear lady, said Mr. Wonka, you're new to the scene. When you have been with us a little longer, nothing will amaze you. The skyhooks, the Grandma Josephine. I assume one ending hooked onto this contraption we're riding. And right, said Mr. Wonka. What is the other end hooked onto? Said Grandma Josephine. Every day, said Mr. Wonka. I get deaf and different. Remind me, please, to call up my ear back the moment you get back. Charlie, said Grandma Josephine, I don't think I trust this gentleman very much. Nor do I, said Grandma Georgina. There's photos around. Charlie leaned over the bed and whispered to the two old women. Please, he said, don't spoil everything. Mr. Wonka is a fantastic man. He's my friend. I love him. Charlie's right, whispered Grandpa Joe, joining the group. Now you be quiet, Josie, and don't make trouble. Must hurry, said Mr. Wonka. We have so much time and so little to do. No, wait. Cross that out. Reserve it. Thank you. Now, back to the factory, he cried, clapping his hands once and springing 2 feet into the air with 2 fingers. Back me fly to the factory, but we must go up before we can come down. We must go higher and higher. What did I tell you? Said Grandma Josephine. The man's corrected. Be quiet, Josie, said Grandpa Joe. Mr. Wonka knows exactly what he's doing. As crap, said Grandma Georgina. Must go higher, said Mr. Wonka. Must go tremendously high. Hold on to your stomach He pressed a brown button. The elevator shuttled, and then, with a fearful whoosh noise, it shot vertically outward like a rocket. Everybody clutched hold of everybody else, and as the great machine gathered speed and rushed, whoosh, sound of wing outside grew louder and louder, and shriller. Until it began a piercing shriek, and you had to yell to make yourself heard. "Stop!" yelled Grandma Josephine. "Joe, you make him stop. I want to get off. Save us!" yelled Grandpa George. "Now go down!" yelled Grandpa George. No, Mr. Wonka, go back. We've got to go up. But why? They all screamed at once. Why up and not down? Because the higher when we start coming down, the faster we'll all be going when we hit, said Mr. Wonka. We've got to be going at an absolutely sizzling speed and we hit. When we hit what? They cried. The factory, of course, answered Mr. Wonka. You must be whackers, said Grandma Josephine. We'll all be ploppified. We'll be scrambled by axe, said Grandma George. Not that, said Mr. Wonka. It's a chance we shall have to take. You're joking, said Grandma Josephine. Tell us you're joking. Madam, said Mr. Wonka, another joke. Oh, my dear, cried Grandma Georgina. We'll be licked, every one of us. More than likely, said Mr. Wonka. Grandma Josephine screamed and disappeared under the bedcloth. Grandma Georgina clutched Grandpa George's tight hand changed shape. Mr. and Mrs. Plunkett stood hugging each other, speechless with fright. Only Charlie and Grandpa Joe kept modestly cool. They had traveled a long way with Mr. Wonka and had grown accustomed to surprise. But as the great elevator continued to streak upward further and further away from the earth, even Charlie began to feel a trifle nervous. Mr. Wonka, he yelled above a noise. What I don't understand is why we've got to come down at such a terrific speed. My dear boy, Mr. Wonka answered, if we don't come down at terrific speed, we'll never burst out way back into the roof of the factory. It's not easy to punch a hole in a roof as strong as that. But there's a hole in already, said Charlie. We made it when we came out. That we shall make another, said Mr. Wonka. 2 holes are better than 1. Any mouse will tell you that. Higher and higher rushed the great glass elevator until soon they could see the country and the ocean and the earth spread out below them like a map. It was all very beautiful. But when you are standing on a glass floor looking down, it gives you a nasty feeling. Even Charlie was beginning to feel frightened now. He hung on tightly to Grandpa Joe's hand and looked up anxiously into the old man's face. I'm scared, Grandpa, he said. Grandpa Joe put an arm around Charlie's shoulders and held him close. So am I, Charlie, he said. Mr. Wonka, Charlie shouted. Don't you think this is about high enough? Very nearly, Mr. Wonka answered, but not quite. We talk to me, please. Don't disturb me. I must watch this very carefully at this stage. Split second Tommy, my boy. That's what it's got to be. You see this green button? I must press it at exactly the right instant. If I'm just half a second later, then we go too high. What happens if we go too high? Asked Grandpa Joe. Don't please stop talking and let me concentrate, Mr. Wonka said. At a precise moment, Grandma Josephine poked her head out from below under the sheet and peered over the edge of the bed. Through the glass floor, she saw the entire continent of North America nearly 200 miles below and looking no bigger than a ball of chocolate. Someone's got to stop this maniac, she screeched, and she shot a wrinkled old hand and grabbed Mr. Wonka by the coattail and yanked him backward onto the bed. No! Cried Mr. Wonka, struggling to free himself. Let me go! I have this thing to see too. Don't disturb the pilot, you madman! Screeched Grandma Josephine, shaking Mr. Wonka too fast. His head became a blur. You got us back home this instant! Let me go! Cried Mr. Wonka. I've got to press that button. Oh, we'll go too high. Let me go. But Grandma Josephine hung on. Charlie, shouted Mr. Wonka. Press the button, the green one. Quick. Charlie leaped across the elevator and banged his thumb down on the green button. As he did so, the elevator gave a mighty groan and rolled over onto its side, and the rush whooshing noise stopped altogether. There was an eerie silence. Too late! Cried Mr. Wonka. Oh my God, that's me! You crooked! As he spoke, the bed with a very old one in it, and Mr. Wonka on top lifted gently off the floor and hung suspended in mid-air. Charlie and Grandpa Joe and Mr. and Mrs. Bucket also floated upward so that it swamped the entire company, as well as the back were floating around like balloons inside the great glass elevator. Now look what you've done, said Mr. Wonka, floating about. What happened? Grandma Josephine called out. She had floated clear off the bed and was hovering near the ceiling in her nightshirt. Did you go too far? Charlie asked. Too far? Said Mr. Wonka. Of course we went too far. You know where we've gone, my friends. We've gone into orbit. They gasped. They gaped. They gasped. They stared. There are two fabricants to speak. We are now rushing around the earth at 17,000 miles an hour, Mr. Wonka said. How does that grab you? I'm choking, they gasped. Grandma George nodded. I can't breathe. Of course you can, said Mr. Wonka. There's no air up here. He sort of swam across under the ceiling to a button marked oxygen. He pressed it. You'll be all right now. He said, breath away. This is weirdest feeling, Charlie said, forming around about. I feel like a bubble. It's great, said Grandpa Joe. It feels as though I don't weigh any at all. You don't, said Mr. Wonka. None of us weigh anything, not even 1 ounce. What a peep, said Grandma Georgina. I weigh 137 pounds exactly. Now you don't, said Mr. Wonka. You're completely weightless. The 3 old one, Grandpa Joe, Grandma Georgina and Grandma Josephine were trying frantically to get back into bed, but without success. The bed was floating about in mid-air. There, of course, were also floating, and every time they got above the bed or tried to lay down, they simply floated up out of it. Charlie and Grandpa Joe were hooting with laughter. "What's so funny?" said Grandma Josephine. "We've got you out of bed at last," said Grandpa Joe. "Shut up and help us back," snapped Grandma Josephine. "Forget it," said Mashonka. "You'll never stay down. Just keep floating around and be happy." "The man's a madman!" cried Grandma Josephine. Georgina, "Watch out, I said! Or he expect the lot of us."